Cody, thank you so much for speaking with us. First off, I want to get your reaction to the process that is playing out here. As we said earlier, these items in the Vatican Museum are going to be returned in a church-to-church process between the Vatican and the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. The CCCB says they are working closely with Indigenous peoples, but First Nations scholars are still seeing some red flags here. What do you make of all this?
I think it's fascinating that the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops has really clearly asserted, and the Vatican has clearly asserted, that this is going to be a church-to-church transfer. And the reason why is because they don't want to establish a precedent of the Vatican as a state repatriating these items directly to Indigenous nations. There's going to be that intermediary. Now, that's their approach. I think it can cause some red flags for First Nations who say, we're not engaging directly with the Vatican in this process. We have to go through this intermediary. So I think it's entirely justifiable to express concerns about the process being developed.
Definitely some good points there. Cody, can you also explain how and why the Vatican and Pope Pius XI acquired these items in the 1920s?
This was for a very specific exhibit that was focused on the successes of missionary endeavors as it was framed at the time. So this exhibit happened 100 years ago in 1925. A catalog was produced, which gives us a general sense of some of the items that were depicted or shown in this exhibit. And that's really our starting point, is this catalog. Now, the Vatican collections are extensive. They've been collecting for literally thousands of years. We know there's going to be more in the Vatican collections besides what was in this 1925 exhibit. And again, this is going to be the starting point, ideally, of a much longer process.
And what are some of the long-lasting impacts of not returning these items to their rightful owners? APTN National Chief Cindy Woodhouse-Nepanak has said, these are not artifacts, but living and sacred pieces of our culture and ceremonies.
And I really stand by what the National Chief has said in that statement, because as many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities have asserted, these are not artifacts. We're not going to put them behind a glass case and artificially preserve them. We understand in a lot of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities that when we repatriate these cultural ancestors back to our communities, they might eventually have some wear and tear, they might decay. That's part of the natural life cycle for these ancestors. So by artificially putting them in a storage vault or in a display case and not recognizing their own sentience, then they're not allowed to have that really essential role in community and in the retention and continuity of culture. So returning them needs to be really looking at these items as community members themselves.
Aside from the Vatican sending these items home back to Canada here, what do you think they should do next to move forward on reconciliation?
Well, when we look at how this process is going to play out, we see that the Canadian Museum of History is going to still also play an intermediary role, where they're going to help identify the best descendant communities to return these items to. And we know that in Canada, repatriation efforts have also not been equitably advanced. We know that there's still some deep problems with cultural items being held in Canadian collections, with communities fighting to try to repatriate those. So ideally, this Vatican example is going to be a really notable, a very visible instance of repatriation. We can poke holes at some of the processes in a justifiable way and hopefully develop domestic policies and international policies that really bring repatriation to the forefront in a good way.
Cody Groat is an assistant professor in the Department of History and Indigenous Studies program with Western University in London, Ontario. Thank you for your time, Cody.
Thank you.